nerds? Tom here, and today we're talking about Tabannusi Builders of and this is one of the more easy to pronounce names in this line, but I mean, I just think so. I mean, I could totally be pronouncing it incorrectly. I mean, that could totally be supposed to be pronounced U-R, you know, like that Jordan Peele movie, Us. Is it Us, or is it U-S? So this is going to be a shorter video, mainly because the explanation of this game I'm going to do kind of quickly because it's really hard to describe. There's a decent amount of like complexity in the specificity of the rule, specificity, whatever. Basically, I'm just going to go over things super briefly. So I think the main mechanic of this game would be dice drafting, where you have 5 areas of the board that each have a little clump of dice, and it's all dice of the same color in each different clump, right? Like there's a clump of the blue dice, clump of the white dice, and whatever. And you place a worker at one of those sections, and then you draft the die, and the number on the die will tell you the other section you will go to on your next turn. So if you're in section 5, you place a worker, you grab a die, the die has a 3 on it. On your next turn, you're going to go to the 3 section and draft a die there and do actions and whatnot. But obviously that's on your next turn. Everybody else is going to take their other turns, and then when it comes back to you, you'll go to 3. So it is a lot of pre-planning. Every turn you take, you are kind of planning the other turn. And actually, once you draft that die, the die is kind of wiped, like the number is irrelevant. It just becomes a resource at that point. And then you go on to take your turn, where you do actions at that location. And there are some actions that can be done at like pretty much every location. And then there are other actions that are more specific to the location. And actually, since there are only 5 locations and they're 6-sided die, obviously if you draft a 6, it's kind of like a wow. I feel like I need to mention that. So out of these 5 sections, 3 of them are associated with this big buildings thing, right? 3 different huge clumps where you can build buildings in each clump. So that is a huge portion of the game. I would almost say that this is a dice drafting and building game and tile placement kind of, but not really. I mean, that's where the biggest amount of clunk and misunderstandings can come in the game. There's a lot of rules there. The way you build buildings is a little funky. So I'll get into that a little bit more later. Then there's another section where you can get special abilities that you can trigger throughout the remainder of the game. And then the last section is sort of an endgame scoring area. And those 2 sections are honestly pretty straightforward. There's a little bit of cleverness done in how you will trigger them, like the endgame scoring ones. You know, you kind of have to invest in a tile a couple of times to get more points for that thing that you are going to get, you know, you're going to score on. And then the special ability section also, there are ways that you can, if you do the rows and columns, you'll score extra points for them, and you can get little bonusy tokens on them as well. But obviously most of the points will come from building buildings in that huge section, and there are 3 different types of buildings, 3 different colors. And then you actually have to put plans down first. You have to put plan tiles down first and put your claim markers on them before they can become buildings. And other players can actually build your buildings that you've planned. Like you can put your own plan thing out there and somebody else can build it, and it costs different things. There's also water out there that you can like build on, or you really like you expand the water, and then that water turns into like these vine things, and those vine things can actually like touch buildings and help make them bigger and score more points and stuff. So there is a lot going on in the building section of it, and it's interesting and definitely different and unique. But honestly, it hasn't even been that long since the last time I've played, and I could not for the life of me explain everything to you off the top of my head. I would definitely have to pull out the rules and really read it to know exactly how everything works. And even when teaching it to, you know, new players, not even like, you know, new gamers, but just the first time you sit down to play it, all the rules for that section might kind of wash over you, and it's definitely possible that halfway through the game you'll go to do something and someone will tell you, no, remember, you can't actually do it that way. Why not? Oh, right, that's because of this. Or when you go to score things, you'll be like, wait, why do I get 3 points here instead of 2, or whatever? And then you'll be like, oh yeah, okay, that's how, I forgot that worked that way for this thing, but not for that thing, you know? And I kind of want to use the word clunky to describe that, although I tend to, and a lot of people do, use the word clunky in a negative term. And yeah, I mean, a lot of games that have clunk in them I tend not to like, but this is, I mean, I feel like clunky is an accurate term, but it's still a good game. It's still an enjoyable, like, even that aspect when you finally wrap your mind around exactly all the little intricacies in the rules of how that section of it works, you know, then you understand how you can maximize points there and things like that. And this isn't a super heavy upper echelon game. You know, it's not a Vital Lacerda, nor is it even really close. It's just a heavier of the Euro game. And overall, I really like this game. I mean, I like the drafting mechanic is really clever. Of course, you're trying to get points in tons of different ways, right? But you can never do everything. Like, even everybody will get a card at the beginning of the game that will tell them, hey, if you build in these areas, you know, you'll get bonus points. And honestly, it's super common to not do that. There's also in like the upper right hand of the board, there's a couple of, common goals for everybody and some tracks you can move up. And actually moving up the tracks is really beneficial, but it's really difficult. There's a couple of different ways that you can move up the tracks, but it's not like you're going to shoot up. Like getting all 3 of your tokens to the top of all 3 tracks gets you a buttload of points, but I don't know if anybody could ever do that. And also I say, that getting up to the top of the tracks is really hard. But in the last game I just played, one of my buddies did shoot up, at least one of his tokens shot up one track pretty far, pretty fast. And I was like, oh, well, f me. And this game is overall really fun, even if you lose. I kind of crushed the first time I played it, and then I got crushed super hard the second time I played it, and I still had a good time with it. And actually every time I've only played it at 4 players. With the interaction I see there, I could imagine 3 players still being good, but this is one of the many, many, many games where I would imagine, now to take it with a grain of salt, but I'd imagine that the 2-player would be a kind of different experience. So there are smaller areas on the board in terms of like the buildings, I think it is. So obviously it's modified for 2 players, but still, most of these Euros are generally, my rule of thumb, anytime it's 2 to 4, 2 to 5, or 2 to 6 players, come on, just play a 2-player game at that point, So I do really like this game a lot, but I think it's going to be a little bit too heavy or a little bit too clunky for some people. It's one of the ones that's not for everybody, and if I were to play it with some players, even people who enjoy heavier Euros, if they were to tell me afterwards that they don't really like it, has too much pre-planning, or that, the building thing is a little bit too clunky, I would maybe not agree with them, because I still like the game, but I would totally understand. And actually my buddy Doug, when he was teaching it to me or like telling me about it ahead of time, he's like, it's very different, very unique. There's tons of counterintuitive things. I've played it a bunch and I still don't think I fully understand it. And I think he oversold that aspect of it to me a little bit, but kind of in a good way, because I was like prepared during the teach, okay, this is going to be really weird. And then when he was explaining it to me, I'm like, okay, it's not that weird. It's just not something I'm going to pick up initially or, remember off just the first explanation. But at the end of the day, I actually think I like Origins First Builders better. It's a little bit more my style of game. Like always, if any of what I was talking about in this video sounds interesting to you, I'm going to go ahead and put a purchase link in the description box down below. You can get yourself a copy of this game. There's also going to be a link for Game Toppers down there. And also, while you're down there, you should definitely subscribe to our channel so you'll never be bored. Ba-boom.